All right, welcome back to Western Civ. We pick up here with a period called the Avignon Papacy. I'd taken you to 1500 before, and now we're going to take a step back, actually, back to the 1300s, because we need to talk about the Catholic Church. What's been happening? I showed you the states, the 100 Years' War, these various states rising, the rise of kings. But we need to talk about the Catholic Church because we're heading toward a really important event, the breaking of this Catholic Church, the monopoly of having one church in Europe. The topic here is called the Avignon Papacy and the Great Schism, a schism where this is going to split the church in two. The period we're talking about is going to be picking up in the 1300s and taking it to 1417. 1417 itself isn't significant, but we're going to be heading eventually toward a guy named Martin Luther, who's going to break the hold of the Catholic Church in the year 1517. So from 1417, 100 years later, the Catholic Church is broken, and this has a big impact. What happens here in the 1300s and 1400s has the impact of harming the church irreparably. So let's talk about the church, the power of the Pope. Well, during the time of the Crusades, the 1100s, he is really powerful. Kings will obey him absolutely. In 1200, he continues calling for crusades, great authority there. And then what happens here is as these kings, many kings have to go on crusades, and popes are going to start getting involved in things maybe they shouldn't, secular things that kings had been responsible for, marriages, property, laws. So they start getting involved in secular events and secular affairs and disputes over property. You know, a knight goes on crusade or a king goes on crusade and dies, and a lot of property goes up for grabs. And so they start getting a lot of property going to the church or to the people that they want it to go to. Well, when kings come home from crusade, they start to resent this. They want their authority back. This interference with the laws, the fact that who's making the law? Well, the king makes the law. Well, now people will say, no, I want to turn it over to the church. I want to go to church authorities. You know, they're setting precedents during the crusades. And then the wealth of the church, all this money rolling in. Again, the 1300s, money is rolling into Europe, and the church is amassing a lot of wealth. Well, what about taxation? Kings want to get their hands on that wealth. This is the problem now of popes versus kings. I mean, this has gone back to the 800s, the Dark Ages, but now it reaches a real problem point, pope or kings. And you're getting a lot of rise of kings now. And one of the main problems here is the ability to tax the church. Can you tax that church? A lot of wealth and property in the church. Well, in 1302, the Pope at the time, Boniface VIII, rules on this. A king of France, a king named Philip IV, the Fair, because he's good looking, the king of France was trying to tax properties and churches, and the Pope rules on this. The way a Pope rules is by a papal bull. Now this is papal means the Pope, and a bull means the document. It's a document issued by the Pope. And this one has the title of Unum Sanctum. The papal bulls would start with the first two words of the document, Unum Sanctum. So we refer to this as the papal bull, Unum Sanctum. This is a big one. This Pope's getting a little old and makes this grandiose statement here, the Unum Sanctum. There is one church. Now that's not the big statement there, but he goes on to say that temporal power, the power of people who live temporally, the material world is beneath that of the spiritual world. The spiritual world is undying and perfect. And so the temporal world is imperfect and it will eventually pass away. And so what he's saying here is you can't tax the church. The church is beyond the power of temporal beings. You can't tax the church. You can't tax the clergy. In the 1100s or 1200s, he would have got away with this. No king could stand up to him. And then he goes on to say something really more powerful than this, a statement that even today the Catholic Church is taking this statement back, that you must have the Pope's blessing. This is Boniface saying this, that you must have his blessing for salvation. As another way of putting this is that he could also continue to hell if he wants to. So this statement right here is the one that just drives this beyond anything in the past. The reaction, again, in the past, a king would have submitted to this, but this is a different age, 1302. The Crusades are over. The kings are back home. And Philip IV of France continues to tax the church, and the Pope will excommunicate him, condemn him to hell. And now this would have normally brought, seeking forgiveness. Kings would go on their knees to find the Pope to beg forgiveness. But in 1303, this king, Philip IV of France, is going to send some cavalry down to Rome. They will capture Boniface VIII, rough him up pretty well, release him, and then he will die. So they didn't technically kill him. He was alive when they last saw him, but they pretty much caused the death of this pope. This is not the typical response of begging forgiveness from a pope. This is a king killing a pope, literally, figuratively. So here's what happens now. This Pope Boniface VIII is dead. What do you do for a next pope? Well, the cardinals from all over Europe will come and meet at the Vatican and hold an election, and Philip IV will put some money around and elect a French cardinal to be your next pope. This is Pope Clement V. Now, of all the cardinals I mentioned here, I want you to know Boniface VIII, the issuer of the Unum Sanctum. This pope, you can just refer to him as the French cardinal, this cardinal who becomes pope now. What he does is important, though. He announces, being a French cardinal, now the pope, he's going to move out of Rome. He's leaving Rome and moving to the city of Avignon. Where's Avignon? It is over in present-day France. It's a city on the Rhone River. This is the river that flows south out of the Alps. It's technically his territory. It's part of the Holy Roman Empire. He technically owns it, but it's surrounded by French territory. It's in France. So he's moving to his home in France, and he's not going to go back to Rome. So here's Avignon down in southern France today. Well, this is not good for the Catholic Church. The Pope is a French cardinal going to live under the French king. The Catholic Church refers to this as a 75-year period of a Babylonian captivity. This is terrible. It's a trying time for the church. Can the church survive this like the Jews survived the Babylonian captivity back in the BCs? From 1305 to 1377, a line of popes will serve the church, but in Avignon. They're called the Avignon popes, and they live a life of great luxury. The kings of France will supply them with everything they need. Avignon will become basically a sin city. And people see this. People recognize this, what's happening to the church, that the pope now is simply a puppet, living a life of decadence, serving the king of France. Who's making the call? The king of France decides what's happening. And just as an example to show you how powerful this king of France is over the pope now, of 134 cardinals appointed, popes appoint cardinals, 113 of those were French. That's a domination of French into the Catholic Church. And again, these cardinals elect the pope, so you're stacking the deck to elect French popes. Well, what's the reaction to this? If you're a Catholic at this time, what's your reaction? Well, there's no reason to even support this pope at all. A decline of his authority, decline of his respect, even among churchmen. Why should you respect this guy? He's simply a pawn of the French king. And of course, clearly now, you've got a king who has his own pope at his service. And if you're a king, not the French king, you're not going to obey this pope because he's a pawn of the French king. Avignon is still around. The Pope's palace is still there. Southern France, beautiful city. It's very nice and clean today, but it would have been a different world back in the 1300s. A world of decadence and popes who serve a French king. Well, eventually the popes do get back to Rome. How do they do it? Well, in 1377, one of these popes, these French popes, is dying, and on his deathbed, he wants to get right with God. He wants to save his own soul, and so he declares, I'm moving back to Rome, and then he dies in Rome. So in 1378 now, you need a new pope, and all these cardinals, again, most of them are French, go back to Rome to elect a new pope. Well, something happens here. A mob, as they enter the Vatican to select the next pope, a mob surrounds their building and with brandishing knives and weapons and say, if you elect another French pope, we're going to kill you all. They demand an Italian pope. You better be an Italian pope. If you don't elect an Italian pope, you won't survive this. And again, these people are brandishing weapons, and surprise, surprise, the election of an Italian cardinal to be the Pope, Urban VI. Again, you don't need to know this guy's name, but this Italian cardinal becomes Pope. Well, the French cardinals are going to get out of town quickly. This is going to cause the Great Schism, this election of this Italian Pope, and then these French cardinals getting out of there. They go back to Avignon, nullify the election of that Italian cardinal, and select a French cardinal, one of their own, to be the next Pope Clement VII. All right, so now what's the problem? Now you've got two popes. You've gone from having a Babylonian captivity to now a split in the Catholic Church, a schism, as there are two popes now, one in Rome and one in Avignon. And they will excommunicate each other, as they tell the other one to step down, and they don't, so they excommunicate each other. They will declare the other one the anti-pope. You should talk to me, the pope, and not the other one, the anti-pope. In fact, if you talk to him, you're obviously going to hell. So which one do you support? Well, the King of France obviously will support the one in Avignon, and Spain also will support the one in Avignon. And then, this is during the 100 Years' War, so England is going to support the other one, the one in Rome. Germans will turn to him, and the Italians will obviously turn to him also. This splits Europe, as you've got two popes, and which one do you talk to? And again, Europe at this time is still very fragmented, little tiny states. Another answer would be neither, as a lot of people begin to just turn away from a pope and just, who's responsible for your salvation? Well, your local priest. Well, into this terrible situation, this schism in the Catholic Church, begin the process of church councils. In 1409, a lot of bishops and cardinals get together and decide this is wrecking the Catholic Church. Having these two popes, and nobody's trusting either one of them. They need to heal the church. And they call a council at the city of Pisa in Italy, and they elect a new pope. Well, what's the problem now? The other two don't step down, and you've got now three popes. Well, this only lasts for a few years before they finally get back to one pope at the Council of Constance. Again, bishops and cardinals meeting at the Council of Constance, and they get back to one pope, Martin V. So, 1417, from the 1300s to the 1417, you've had Avignon popes, you've had two popes, three popes, and by 1417, everything appears to be healed now. The Council of Constance heals a lot of wounds in the Catholic Church. You're back to one pope here. All right. But the damage is done. Again, the year 1417. The year we're looking for is 1517. 100 years from now, the church is going to be broken irreparably. Well, these church councils actually continue. A lot of churchmen say, hey, this is a good idea. We pulled all the bishops together and all the cardinals together. People trust that. And so actually church councils will continue to meet through the 1400s all the way to the 1500s. Church councils to decide religious issues. Well, if you're doing that, you're not going to have a strong pope. Through the 1400s, the pope is going to be weak as people rely on church councils rather than him. So that's your situation as you reach 1500 with the Catholic Church. The damage is done in the 1300s and 1400s because we're heading for 1517.